When I was about 4 years old, I was visiting my aunt at her apartment, and I remember being in this very bright, sunny room with blue furniture, and she gave me this glass of water to drink. Somehow that afternoon, I managed to knock the glass over and spill the water on the carpet. Pure accident, no malicious intent, but I felt very badly about this, perhaps in part because my aunt showed just a little bit of frustration with me. And I felt so badly about what happened, though, that I didn't want to see my aunt again, because I thought that when she looked at me, she wouldn't see anything but her stupid nephew who spilled the water on the carpet. Of course, if I actually had to list my top 10,000 sins, spilling the water on the carpet wouldn't even make it close to that list. Yet it was something that I managed to remember all these years, and it survived in my poor memory because I not only felt guilty about what happened, I felt ashamed. Brene Brown defines guilt and shame this way.
The thing to understand about shame is it's not guilt. Shame is a focus on self. Guilt is a focus on behavior. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad.
Intuitively, we recognize that difference. We've experienced it. And because of that, it shouldn't surprise us that these two very different things have such dramatically different results.
There is a huge difference between shame and guilt. And here's what you need to know. Shame is highly, highly correlated with addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide, eating disorders. And here's what you even need to know more. Guilt inversely correlated with those things.
So why this dramatic difference? Why does shame lead down a road that is so dark while guilt seems to bear such good fruit? I think we need to break down Brown's concepts of shame and guilt a little bit farther to understand why shame throws this monkey wrench into the gears of the soul, while guilt, which is not a terribly pleasant feeling either, doesn't. Where we need to start is the same place that Brown started in her talk on vulnerability, and that is with connection.
Connection is why we're here. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives. This is what it's all about. It doesn't matter whether you talk to people who work in social justice and mental health and abuse and neglect. What we know is that connection, the ability to feel connected, is neurobiologically, that's how we're wired, it's why we're here. And shame is really easily understood as the fear of disconnection. Is there something about me that if other people know it or see it, that I won't be worthy of connection?
Shame and guilt have very different relationships with this connection that we all want. But connection is a two-way street. Wanting one doesn't automatically mean that we'll get one. The other person is to choose to connect with us, to be vulnerable, to see us, and in turn, to let themselves be seen.
Shame drives two big tapes, never good enough, and if you can talk it out of that one, who do you think you are?
What's really interesting are the examples she gives about what shame says to us up here.
Shame is the gremlin who says, you're not good enough. You never finished that MBA. Your wife left you. I know your dad really wasn't in Luxembourg, he was in Sing Sing. I know those things that happened to you growing up. I know you don't think that you're pretty enough or smart enough or talented enough or powerful enough. I know your dad never paid attention even when you made CFO.
If all of those things were true of me, some of them might be partly my fault, but others, not so much. And now it seems that our distinction between guilt and shame is breaking down because some of the things that she ascribes to shame are the result of our actions, and so we should feel guilty, not ashamed, as she defines it. But there's a deeper problem at work here because our actions are not something outside of us like our clothing. They're the direct result of who we are as people. And the unhappy truth is that sometimes the things we have done have destroyed our connection with others and we're justly separated from them. Jesus was pointing out the connection between who we are and what we do when he said, "The things that come out of the mouth come from the heart, and they defile. For from the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, unchastity, theft, false witness, and blasphemy." Scripture pushes the view that I didn't just tell a lie, but I am a liar. And I didn't just commit adultery, I am an adulterer. And I think common sense tells us the same thing. Bad people do bad things. Good people do good things. But now guilt is starting to sound even more and more like shame. So again, what is the difference? The key, I think, is what these two different things say to another person.
Guilt. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Shame. I'm sorry, I am a mistake.
If you're watching this video right now, there's a good chance that at some point in your life you felt guilty about something, and also a very good chance that you've said, I'm sorry, to someone at some point and meant it. There's also a good chance that you felt shame at some point. But how many of you have ever said to someone, I am a mistake, or anything like it? Even if you felt it, you never said it because shame prevents us from approaching another person. I didn't want to see my aunt after I spilled the water, not because I didn't like my aunt, but because I didn't think she could like me. I'm sorry gets said because connection has been lost and we want it restored. I am a mistake doesn't get said because, yeah, the connection has been lost, but we have no hope of its restoration. St. Thomas Aquinas said that hope exists in the realm of our desires, and it has 4 key characteristics. It is a reaching out for something that's good, that's not currently present, but in the future, that's difficult to get, but possible to attain. And the only difference between hope and despair is that last criterion, possibility. St. Thomas observed that once we believe the good thing we want is impossible to attain, we recoil from it. Let's listen again to those tapes that Brown talked about.
Shame drives 2 big tapes, never good enough. And if you can talk it out of that one, who do you think you are?
It is despair that turns what Brown calls guilt into what she called shame. Oddly enough, thinking that I am a bad person doesn't mean that I'm without hope. Even though I know I don't deserve a connection with the person I've wronged, if I believe that they will show mercy on me, well, then I can still have hope for a renewed personal connection. But St. Thomas reminds us that once we lose that hope, and most especially once we lose the supernatural hope that points us toward heaven, we will inevitably plunge headlong into self-destruction. Despairing of heaven means despairing of ever being truly happy. And this too fits in with what Brown's research indicates.
We live in a vulnerable world. And one of the ways we deal with it is we numb vulnerability. We are the most in debt, obese, addicted, and medicated adult cohort in U.S. history. Shame is highly, highly correlated with addiction, depression, violence, aggression, bullying, suicide, eating disorders.
Despair is so powerful because we recoil from what we most want and most need. The desire for connection is at our very core, and once the hope of it is lost, the tide of darkness sweeps in, and it's a darkness that every age has known. One Latin epitaph from ancient Rome reads, In nihil ab nihil quam cito residimus. How quickly we fall back from nothing to nothing. On what then can we hang our hope?